We were beefing a little bit up until a couple months ago, and I hope that we're not beefing again after I say this. I watched a video of his about the Texas Legislature, and it was great and it was interesting. And thank you for talking about Texas, Bill. But
we are the Armed Attorneys. Things are happening here in the Texas House and Senate. There's some drama unfolding that we have to talk about because it can affect and probably will affect gun owners here in the state. So we're going to be talking the drama, the numbers, and a list. And is your lawmaker on this list? We'll have that for you because it really, for people who say that Texas is safe, I don't know that we're there yet. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. Now, the Texas House and Senate, we've had our elections. The House moved to the right a little bit. We picked up, in the 88th legislative session, we had 86 Republicans. We picked up 2 seats. We have 88. The Texas legislative session for the 89th session begins on January the 14th. It goes till June the 2nd. And so we've moved a little bit to the right in the House. That's very, very important. Why? Well, the House is pretty simple. You just need a majority to pass things. And so that's great. Our Senate makeup has changed. We've moved from 19 Republicans to 20 Republicans, so picking up 1 seat. But that is much more significant because we only have 31 members there, and there's kind of some silly procedural stuff. It's not just a majority that we have to talk about, but there are things that happen.
there are. I really appreciate that, like good reality television, the Texas Legislature does get more and more dramatic year on year now. I would say it was probably like 2019. Wasn't that our Kumbaya session?
Yes.
Okay, great, super. I mean, really, everyone, adults in the room. And since then, increasingly, it's like the Real Housewives of the Texas Capitol, which is fascinating to watch. Not always great for good governance, but I'm hopeful this session.
Yes, and so talking about that majority in the Senate just a little bit more, moving from 19 members to 20 members, so the House, we said, you need 50 votes to get something through. In the Senate, they do this kind of bizarre procedure where they have to consider bills in the order that they're sent off to the committees. And so what happens every single session, they get a bill through the committee really, really fast, and they call it the blocker bill, and it holds up everything else for the rest of the session. Well, in order to suspend the rule on considering things in order, you need a 5/9 majority. So that's 56%. And so in order to take things out of order. So effectively, that's the vote to get things passed in the Senate. Now, last session, with 19 Republicans, if you had 2 defect, your bill's dead. So you see how that kind of messes things up. So you see, all right, that buffer has grown just a little bit. The Dan Patrick, we don't have the votes. I mean, that's the vote he's talking about. Do we have 18 Republicans to suspend that rule? Now we got a little bit of a buffer.
We do. So what is happening right now? Right now, this week, the Texas Legislature is voting on who is going to be Speaker of the House. And boy, is it high drama.
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones style drama. We have had a speaker in the past. Gosh, how many sessions?
2.
2? 2 sessions. He was good on guns, Dade Phelan. However, he was committed to appointing Democratic committee chairs, which, I suppose you understand why in a state legislature, you want to make a lot of friends. However, the result was whenever we wanted to modify gun bills that made their way into Democratic committees, we had big old problems. So he has withdrawn his name from the speaker race. He is not going to be speaker again. We've got 2 guys. We've got David Cook on one side. We've got Dustin Burrows on the other side. What's the difference between these 2 guys?
So, I'll say ideologically, they probably align super stinking close, except for 2 issues. And so the Republican caucus, they have the biggest caucus out of all the caucuses. They met this past weekend to determine, all right, who is going to be our speaker? Because the way that they've written their rules, whoever gets voted to be the Republican caucus, they all agree that they are going to support that person to be the speaker. And so they had this kind of dramatic chain of events, but ultimately landed with David Cook. But here's where the rub is. Burrows is not throwing, he's still saying, I'm still in the race, and is crossing the aisle in order to garner support, it appears. The two issues where I think they differ on is that Democratic chairmanship. That's a priority for the Republican Party of the state of Texas. They said we do not want our speaker electing or appointing Democratic chairmen. Okay. The second one is school choice. That one's a little bit more nebulous, but the folks that walked out with Burrows, they appear to be mostly anti-school choice people too. So as far as I can tell, those are the two issues.
Yes, and school choice. I mean, I understand this is a gun channel here, and this is not exactly what you're here for, but I will tell you, school choice has been probably the top most contentious issue in the state of Texas for 2 years now. Greg Abbott called, I think, 269 special sessions to get it passed in the last couple of years. Didn't get it over the finish line. And now we have a really successful effort by Greg Abbott and that portion of the Republican Party to push out most of the lawmakers who did not want school choice. So it's a fascinating time. It's a wonderful time to be alive.
Yes, and so, Dustin's great on guns. I mean, if we look at his track record, extremely conservative, has been a friend of the Second Amendment. Cook, I imagine, will have the same, kind of the same track record there. It's not as long as Burrows, but it's there for sure. That's who the Republican caucus voted for, is Cook. Now, here's why this no Democrat chairs matters, though. The Democrats make up 41%. They'll make up 41% of the makeup, right? So they're not in the majority. They're an opposition party. What we see in most legislatures, hey, guess what? The party that wins, they get to control the House. And at this point, I mean, they have a big, not a super majority, but a very big, healthy majority where we can have lots of lawmakers defect and still get, agenda items passed. All right. If we have those Democratic chairs, when we look at gun bills, what committees are these bills going to?
Well, they're going to Homeland Security and Public Safety. That's
Yep.
any modification of, just think of it as, your carry laws generally. What you can and can't do, where you can and can't carry, things like that. That is almost always chaired by a Republican. Great. That's where we get most of our good work done in Texas. However, anytime we want to modify criminal procedure, and that can be very, very important because that's things like, do you get pretrial immunity? That's
Right.
things like punishment for, firearm crimes, which potentially affects self-defenders. We have had historically under Dade Faden Democratic chairs, which means all hope is lost at the very beginning of the session. I mean, you file it, you try anyway, but you are going to get no progress, nothing done. Don't waste your breath.
Yeah, and to give a little inside baseball of how this works, so you have your speaker, they appoint their chairs. The chairs, whenever a bill gets filed, the speaker, they deliver to the different committees, hey, these are the bills that you're going to consider. And then if they pass out a committee, they come back to the full House for a vote. In the Senate, it's very similar. And the chairman of each committee acts as their own little calendar committee, and they decide whether or not something gets a hearing, whether or not something gets a vote. And so, if you have...
They have power.
Yeah, they have a ton of power if one of your big priorities, like Emily said, self-defense stuff, pretrial immunity stuff, civil jurisprudence, if we want to have, change up liability for self-defenders or protect self-defenders. If these things fall into Democratic committees, the chairmans kill these things. They don't see the light of day.
Right. So we actually decided we wanted to talk about this topic, not just because it is fascinating and it's all happening right now in Texas, but, and I will preface this by saying, one of my favorite content creators, I watch his stuff all the time, Washington Gun Law, Bill Kirk. I also know him personally. I think we were beefing a little bit up until a couple months ago, and I hope that we're not beefing again after I say this. I watched a video of his about the Texas Legislature, and it was great and it was interesting, and thank you for talking about Texas, Bill, but he concluded at the end of the video basically like, don't worry about it. Guns are safe in Texas. You've got all these bills that are pre-filed that are super anti-gun. Here they are. They're wild, right? But don't worry about it. Look how many Republicans you got. Don't worry about it. Bill is incorrect because guns are actually not a sure thing in Texas, even with the Republican majorities. For one reason, what Richard's been talking about with the House and with the Democratic chairs. So there are lots of things that are not going to even come to a vote, come to a hearing because of Democratic chairs on the House side. But the Senate is wildly anti-gun for a big group of Republicans.
Yeah, and we saw there were bills that really, I mean, they were coming very close to passing last session. We have moved a little bit right this session. It is not a sure thing.
No. Well, and the thing is, like, even moving right, because we have high level leadership in the Senate who is very anti-gun under the table.
Yep.
You don't hear it out loud all the time, but it is 100% true. And then you have the Texas Senate in the pockets of all of the law enforcement lobbies. And so you get these really bad gun bills, like straight up anti-gun bills, couched as,
Pro law enforcement.
tough on crime, pro law enforcement. And then when you show up and you're like, hey guys, Joan Huffman, hey guys, stop doing this because you're not helping cops that much and you're really hurting regular gun owners, they're like, we don't care about them.
Yeah,
we care about the law enforcement lobbies.
It fits on a bumper sticker. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll say, if you look at our Senate bills, typically the first 30 numbers, if you see like an SB and it's 1 through 30, that means that it is a priority of the Speaker of the Senate. And so who we're talking about, Dan Patrick, he had only one priority fail last session, and I think it's in large part to you folks, because we made several videos about it. It was SB 23 by Joan Huffman, and it created a mandatory minimum for virtually any crime where there was a firearm used. And so, hey, guess what? Whenever you change the mandatory minimum on these cases where we have justified self-defense, these all-or-nothing cases, the state has this giant lever to pull. Guess what? It really, really hurts self-defenders.
You are strong-arming pleas for self-defenders who did nothing wrong, because all of a sudden they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. If I get convicted at trial by a wild jury, this is my minimum. This is my minimum prison time. Plus, not just that, but prosecutors are like rubbing their sweaty little hands together, and they're offering higher plea bargains because they know that's the minimum.
Right. And so, we tried to fix this too. We went and spoke to our office, went and spoke to our legal counsel. I
testified.
Yeah, we went in and tried to offer an amendment to this that would basically carve out self-defenders, because, hey, guess what? The people you need to worry about are repeat violent offenders. It's not these 65-year-olds on a fixed income who were forced to defend themselves. We don't need to treat these people the same as 25 to life gangbangers. So, maybe you hold your horses just a little bit, completely disregard it. But guess what? We killed it.
We did.
Yeah, so that's something, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But to say that Texas is safe red when it comes to gun control, no. There's about a dozen. There's been about 100 bills filed that are anti-2A, anti-self-defense. I'll say about a dozen of these things are going to be moving, and we have to pay very, very close attention.
Yes. So what are you so-called lawyers doing about it? Just a reminder to anyone who doesn't watch the channel regularly, this is a place where we actually do that thing. So we are, in fact, lobbyists. We do lobby for good gun laws, to take bad gun laws off the books. This is what we do every odd-numbered year from January to June. We've
drafted about a dozen pieces of legislation. Half have already been filed.
So, and we'll go up there, and we'll be up there every week, and we'll be testifying, and we'll be fighting, and so we will do our best to keep you safe. And when we need you, we will put out a call to action.
Yes, and on this one, we're going to throw up an image here just for a little bit. Pause it if you want to see if your lawmaker is on this list of supporting David Cook. We'll throw that up on screen, and just know, if your lawmaker is not on this list, it's possible that, hey, guess what? They're defecting. They're working with Dustin Burrows on this one. Why it matters: Dustin Burrows, great lawmaker, great on gun laws, but we can't have Democratic chairs, and so you need to talk to your lawmakers about that. That is an issue of concern, but we hope you enjoy this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.